So this morning I finished chapter 1 of my horror novel, and I'm about to sit down to write chapter 2, but wanted to give a little bit of a progress update in terms of where I'm at. I believe that chapter 1 is going to end up being around 2,000 words. I haven't transcribed it all from my journal yet. I have a feeling that this is going to end up being around a 60,000-ish word novel or so definitely on the shorter side. So I'm going to say that I'm about 3% done, very, very early on, and maybe even earlier than that if it ends up being a little bit longer. But I wanted to share what I've written in chapter 1. I'm not very good about sharing the actual plot details of my stories, but this kind of gives me an opportunity to practice that. So this story follows a character named Petros. And Petros is a priest of this strange religion that is all built around this literal pit inside of this cave. And people refer to this pit as the lips of God. And in centuries past, and some people say even more recently, people believe that God has spoken to them from this pit. Petros is one of these people who believes that he has heard the voice of God or some kind of a deity from this pit. He believes that he heard it when he was a young boy, and ever since then, he's wanted to be a priest. And when the story starts, that's what he is, and he's conducting this worship service. But when our story picks up, he's inebriated. And even as he's saying these prayers and trying to conduct this service, he's having cold sweats. He's remembering somebody that he lost some time ago. And so he's very much not himself, but the service must go on. And so he's trying to lead people through the rituals that they practice, all circled around this massive pit. And one of the worshipers, Michael, approaches him because he's hearing something strange in the cave. And Petros also hears it too. It's a rumbling sound. And Petros immediately believes that this must be the voice of God speaking to him again. And so he keeps everybody within the cave, tells them to pray and be silent. And Michael has a feeling that there's something else going on, that maybe they need to leave. But Petros tells them to stay. And sure enough, enormous slabs of rock suddenly start falling from the sides of the cave. It starts crumbling in on itself. Dozens of these worshipers are being killed by these falling rocks, and everybody is just rushing for the entrance. And Petros, for a moment, he's frozen. He doesn't know what to do. He's seeing people leap into the pit just to avoid being crushed by these rocks. He's seeing people getting trampled as the crowds try to push for the opening of the cave. And Petros, when he sort of snaps out of this frozen state, he is no different. He rushes for that light beyond the cave. But he feels a tug at his robe, kind of pulling him down. And he looks down and sees that one of these people who's being trampled is Michael. And Michael is begging to be helped up. And instead of helping him, Petros pulls off his robe and leaves Michael there behind. And just as Petros escapes, the whole cave comes toppling down, completely cutting off the entrance. And Petros just passes out on the ground. And when he eventually comes to, he looks back and sees just a pile of rubble where this cave used to be, where this pit used to lie. And he finds his robe in the rubble, and he pulls it out and he starts to put it on as something to comfort him, something familiar. But he feels that it's heavier than it was before, and he looks down and he sees Michael's severed hand still clinging tightly to that robe. And that's where the chapter ends. And in chapter 2, I have a rough idea of where I want to go, but essentially what Petros is going to be dealing with, along with these other priests, is what to do with this religion, now that this central object of worship has been essentially swallowed up. And without giving too much away, a sort of a plot is contrived to try to revive this religion that seems almost certainly doomed. And so that's the rough idea of what I have ahead of me in chapter 2. And so yeah, I'm going to sit down to write for a bit, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so just wrapped up. I think it was a pretty good writing session. I started chapter 2 differently than I was expecting to. I think it will end where I had originally thought, but it felt like after the end of chapter 1, there needed to be a bit of a breather. And so I think that I've provided that with where chapter 2 starts. We'll see if that changes in revision, but solid start. Hopefully, chapter 2, I'll be able to wrap up within the next week, maybe faster. We'll see. But yeah, until then, catch you next time.